You're listening to the Shared Security Podcast, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology with your host, Tom Eston. In episode 121 for May 18th, 2020, a new Thunderbolt flaw that could let hackers steal your data in under 5 minutes, new vulnerabilities in a popular WordPress plugin, and details on why the US Senate just rejected a plan to require a warrant to obtain Americans' web browsing history. Raise your hand if you think your smartphone is more of a distraction than a convenience. I know I'm raising my hand right now, and many of you are probably doing the same. I personally struggle with the constant bombardment of text messages, Facebook and Twitter notifications, and updates from Amazon about every stage of travel that my most recent order is in. I mean, I honestly don't care if my package is only 10 stops away, but thanks for letting me know anyway, Amazon. But it's tough to just stop using your phone, and it's also a pain to turn off your phone or hide it someplace where you know you're not going to be able to access it. So here's a better solution. Place your phone in a silent pocket Faraday sleeve, which will block all wireless signal, making your device completely silent and distraction-free on a temporary basis. And right now, you can get 15% off a Faraday sleeve or other silent pocket product by using discount code SHAREDSECURITY during checkout. Visit silentpocket.com and make your smartphone a little less distracting.
Over 90% of individuals show risky behavior in handling potential phishing messages, according to ClickArmor's free CanIBeFished.com self-assessment. This engaging coronavirus edition of CanIBeFished.com can help identify your team's total vulnerability to phishing attacks that exploit the pandemic situation. So test your own vulnerability to phishing attacks for free now at CanIBeFished.com.
Welcome to the Shared Security Weekly Blaze podcast, where we update you on this week's most important cybersecurity and privacy news. These podcasts are published every Monday and are 15 minutes or less, quickly giving you news that you can use. Wired reported last week that a Dutch researcher has demonstrated that if an attacker has physical access to a PC manufactured before 2019 and it has a Thunderbolt port, they can bypass the login screen of a sleeping or locked computer and even its hard disk encryption to gain full access to the computer's data. All of this in about 5 minutes. And you know it's serious when the attack even has a cool name, ThunderSpy, as it's now being called. Thunderbolt ports, which we all know as USB-C, are the do-it-all ports on most newer PCs that can not only power your laptop, but also transfer data 8 times faster than USB 3 and has 4 times more video bandwidth than HDMI. Now, we've always said that once someone has physical access to your computer, it's pretty much game over to begin with. But this vulnerability is a little different, as there is no software fix, and the only way to prevent it would be to physically disable the Thunderbolt port completely. Now, you also have to open up the back of the laptop with a screwdriver to attach a device that reprograms the firmware of the Thunderbolt port. So while there is some work here, it's not impossible, and if you were a target by, say, a nation state or perhaps a celebrity, politician, or other high-profile person, someone only needs 5 minutes alone with your laptop to steal all your data. This is a perfectly plausible attack, say if a victim was staying in a hotel room. Oh, and what's also interesting is that Apple Mac computers are not vulnerable to this attack. Now, this isn't the first time that Thunderbolt ports have come under fire. Last year, a collection of vulnerabilities known as Thunderclap showed that plugging a malicious device into a computer's Thunderbolt port can quickly bypass all of its security measures. Intel, who created Thunderbolt technology, released an update to prevent this vulnerability, but it's not been fully adopted because many Thunderbolt computers made before 2019 are not compatible with the new protections. This update, called Kernel Direct Memory Access Protection, could also prevent this new attack as well. So what do you do if you think you may be a target for this attack? Well, the researcher has released a tool which can check to see if your PC is vulnerable and what you can do about it. Check out our show notes for a link to this tool, and second, consider not leaving your laptop or PC unsecured, especially if you're traveling, whenever this whole pandemic blows over, of course. And even though this is a pretty powerful attack, for most of us, it's not something that we should worry too much about. Do you run and manage a WordPress site and happen to use a plugin called Page Builder by SiteOrigin? If so, did you know that this plugin is currently the most popular page creation plugin for WordPress? In fact, it's actively installed in over 1 million websites across the world. Well, with that type of popularity, it's also become a recent target for attackers with the recent disclosure of several vulnerabilities which can allow attackers to forge requests on behalf of a site administrator and execute malicious code in the administrator's browser. This would lead to an attacker having full access to a WordPress instance and all associated data. Now, these flaws, which are known as cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery, require a carefully crafted link sent to the victim by an attacker in order to execute the vulnerability. These vulnerabilities are rated critical because of the extreme rise in phishing attacks due to the recent pandemic. WordPress, which is the most popular open source website software used by bloggers, businesses, and major news corporations like Bloomberg and CBS News, is a hot target for attackers, and it's not always the core WordPress software that's the target. It's the thousands upon thousands of plugins that are what attackers go after. Oftentimes, these plugins are developed with security vulnerabilities and sometimes never fixed or patched, especially plugins which may be abandoned by developers and no longer supported. So that's why I recommend that if you run a WordPress site, always keep your plugins up to date and check to see if said plugins are still being maintained and updated. And while you're at it, remove any plugins that you may not be using anymore. The good news is that Page Builder by SiteOrigin was quickly patched, so if you do use this plugin, be sure you're running the latest version. Check out our show notes for links to their plugin page for more details. And now a word from our sponsor, Edgewise Networks. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved are flat networks in cloud and data centers, with unprotected attack paths that allow threats to move laterally to cause data breaches. But microsegmentation using network addresses is complicated and takes too much time. But there's a better approach: Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation, delivering results immediately with a security outcome that's provable. At the core of Edgewise Auto Segmentation is Zero Trust Identity, which allows workloads to communicate only after their software identity has been verified. Malicious or unimproved software is no longer allowed to communicate. Identity-based protection provides more coverage with fewer policies to make Edgewise simple to deploy and manage. No changes to the application or network are required. One solution protects virtual machines and containers in the cloud and on-premises. To stop lateral threat movement and prevent breaches, visit edgewise.net for a demo and to see results within minutes. While we were all just starting to emerge from our quarantine and stay-at-home orders across the U.S. Senate last week just narrowly rejected a bipartisan amendment that would have required the government to first obtain a warrant before accessing Americans' web browsing data. This amendment would have required probable cause or reasonable justification of a crime to obtain a warrant. This would have been much more than what is currently required under the existing Patriot Act law, which allows the mass collection of Americans' browsing data. In typical American fashion, the amendment fell short by a single vote, and 4 senators who were expected to vote in favor of the amendment did not vote because they were absent for various reasons. The vote was focused on controversial Section 215 within the Patriot Act, which allows broad powers for the government to collect any, quote, tangible thing from libraries and other businesses as long as it's relevant to a national security inquiry. This amendment is just one of several other reforms to the government's surveillance powers, which including Section 215 expired in March. The U.S. Senate is expected to vote on a final bill later this week. One of the amendment sponsors, Senator Ron Wyden, said in a speech given to the Senate floor, quote, "Right now, the government can collect web browsing and internet search history without a warrant under Section 215 of the Patriot Act. Section 215 is the most controversial and dangerous provision of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That's because it's so vague and so broad. Under Section 215, the government can collect just about anything as long as it's relevant to an investigation. This can include the private records of innocent, law-abiding Americans. They don't have to have done anything wrong. They don't have to be suspected of anything. They don't even have to have been in contact with anyone suspected of anything. Their personal information just has to be relevant, end quote. I couldn't agree more with Senator Wyden. Section 215 has been and will continue to be one of the largest privacy concerns that U.S. citizens have faced. And if this concerns you too, I encourage you to write your representatives to let them know how you feel about this topic and that there should be better laws to protect our privacy. Not sure how to contact your elected officials? Check out our show notes for a link on how to do so. That's a wrap for this week's show. Visit our website, sharedsecurity.net, for previous episodes, links to our social media feeds, our YouTube channel, and to sign up for our email newsletter. First-time listener to the podcast? Please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you like this episode, please share it with friends and colleagues. Thanks for listening, and see you next week for another episode of the Shared Security Weekly Blaze.